Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about how I personally program the deadlift for my lifters. Because, I get a lot of questions about the deadlift in my comments, and people are always asking about the heavy work, Oh, if you're going to do block pulls, how many should I do? What percentages? So on and so forth. Without thinking about the fact that if you look at how I generally program my deadlift, and it's successfully gotten me in my 40s past 600. And you look at how I program for my clients, because a lot of people have seen some of their vlogs at this point. And I have guys who've got pretty big numbers relative to their body weight. In other words, I have guys who are at 550 plus who weigh less than 200 pounds. Actually, I've got guys in that range who weigh less than 190 pounds. And I have a couple guys who are up over 200 who are pulling over 600. And I'm not saying I'm producing the best deadlifters of the world, but I program pretty similar to how they do at Westside. And people need to grasp that there are two ways to program the deadlift. You can either do very high specificity with lots of deadlifting, which I feel beats you up, beats you into the ground, limits your overall training ability. Or you can do very little deadlifting and do a lot of accessory work, which is not just the conjugate method, but that is the same way that Andy Bolton approached it when he broke a world record on a deadlift. Right? When Andy Bolton broke a world record deadlift, he actually didn't do a lot of deadlifting, and his logic was that he's so strong at a deadlift that it just beats him up to do any sort of remotely challenging deadlifts. It was too much for him to do with too much regularity. And he was right. He was right. So when we do high specificity deadlifting, it's usually for novices, right? It's usually for novices. And anyone who's outside of the novice phase, I take them over to mostly doing speed work. Now, if we're doing double maxes on max days, we might do a max pull every week. But more often than not, the majority of my lifters do a max deadlift variation once every other week, right? So only twice a month. So 2 heavy pulls a month. But even if we were doing double maxes, it's still never going to be more than 3 or 4 heavy pulls per month. And most of them don't do rep work. And I found that it just beats them up when I have them do it. And their deadlifts don't increase any faster. So we focus upon the speed work, right? And most of our deadlift volume, the vast majority comes from speed. So if you're doing 10 singles or 6 doubles or something like that, we're doing 10 to 12 pulls. 10 to 12 pulls versus 1 heavy pull that maybe is only 3 heavy singles every other week, right? So we're doing somewhere between 20 and 24 speed pulls in a 2-week period of time versus maybe 3 heavy singles ramping up in the same period of time. So the speed work is what we do for the majority of the pulling, and it teaches you how to pull, it teaches you how to get explosive. We can change it to suit your needs. In other words, if you need more lockout strength, we can pull against more chains. We can pull on a deficit, right? We can do deficit pulls, because again, deficit helps your lockout more. If we're weak below the knee, we can do block pulls for our speed work. In theory, we could do rack pulls, but I don't think this is the best idea. Again, it's hard on equipment, really hard on equipment. But, and also we can then do bands, right, for just overall explosiveness and driving through. So we have a lot we can work with. And of course, and you can do other style. You can do sumo and conventional. And a lot of my lifters do both. I personally have quit doing the sumo because no matter what I do, sumo is just hard on my hips. I'm never as strong at it, even when I've tried to specialize in it. I will come in and pull more conventional after 6 months of doing only sumo than I can pull sumo, right? My conventional goes up from doing sumo more than my sumo goes up from doing sumo. So for me, I don't really mess with it much anymore. But a lot of my lifters do both, and we alternate them. And we get most of our pulling from the speed work because it's easy to recover from. Speed pulls teach you the mechanics. They have a hypertrophic response, and they're very, very easy on your stimulus to fatigue ratio. All right, you can do a bunch of speed pulls, and they don't wear you out. They might be hard on your hands if you're doing a deadlift bar like I do. That can be tough on your hands, but the speed pulls themselves are not taxing. In other words, a full day of speed pulls is less fatiguing than doing one heavy set of deadlifts. It simply beats you up less. You get more total volume of pulling, more hypertrophy, and again, it teaches you to drive through and be faster. Now, we could argue the deadlift is the one lift that probably matters the least on in terms of hitting a max, because it's one that people can really grind. But it's still better if you can do it fast, right? If you can have a fast, explosive pull, you're still better off in spite of that fact. And then so what do? We spend all the other time hypertrophying all the muscles involved. What does that mean? Hamstrings, glutes, hips, erectors, traps, lats, right? And by traps, we could talk about all three parts of the trap. Right? So we spend the rest of our time hypertrophying all the muscles involved, because again, where do we get our strength from? Most of our strength comes from our muscle mass. Again, for us as an individual, not comparing person to person per se, but for you as an individual, building those muscles up will build your deadlift. Right? Because that is where we get our strength. Technique, neuromuscular efficiency, all this other stuff matters less than your hypertrophy. And now in the deadlift, we could say leverage is probably one of the biggest factors too. It is the most leverage-oriented lift as far as your ability to max on, and that is true. But we're still reliant upon muscle mass to do it. So there's a lot of exercises we could do for these things. Again, good mornings, good morning variations, glute bridges. I find the glute bridge carries over quite well to my conventional. Just me personally, a lot of people don't. Romanian deadlifts, reverse hypers, right? Glute ham raises, hamstring curls, and how about all of our back? Rows. And again, certain rows can teach you to set up better. Pull-ups, chin-ups, high pulls, maybe even shrugs, right? We come in and we build all of those muscles. Everything on the posterior side of your body, all the way from the top of your traps down to the hamstring at the base of the knee, all of that matters on the deadlift. We could even argue that quads matter. Now, people say quads don't matter. Yeah, they do. One head of the quad matters a lot, the rectus femoris. And in fact, on deadlifts itself, the rectus femoris lights up very, very hard. Right? It lights up very hard. So even working on that part of your quad can increase your deadlift. And that's one of the things people will say, well, are quads really that used? Well, no, the lower quads aren't used heavily in the deadlift because of the knee angle involved. But there's still a lot of quad drive. And again, it's the rectus femoris up near the top. So making sure that that's stronger, again, can build your deadlift off the floor. So again, we hypertrophy all these muscles. And this is how I program, and this is usually what I recommend, and it's a completely incompatible style with the other way of deadlifting. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.